Our next unit in economics is called the stock market. Our lesson today is called the stock market, how it started. Our goals for this lesson are to trace the history of the development of the stock market from Europe to America. Look at your vocabulary words. The formal name of the curb traders, the AMEX as it is known, began in 1908, is American Stock Exchange. Certificate guaranteed that the original investment will be paid with interest at a specified date is a bond. Trading, which began on the street curb because the NYSE turned down certain stocks, is curb trading. Growth in America in mid-19th century, emphasis moved from farming to manufacturing, is the Industrial Revolution. The largest of all American stock exchanges, created in 1792, is the New York Stock Exchange. A unit of the equal parts of the capital stock divided by a corporation is a share. A place where financial securities are bought and sold is stock exchange. Where the New York Stock Exchange originated, still the meeting place of the NYSE, is Wall Street. Money was made not to command our will, but all our lawful pleasures to fulfill. Shame and woe for us if we our wealth obey. The horse doth with the horseman away. Abraham Cowley. Today, there are hundreds of stock exchanges in cities all over the world that work together and play an important part in the economics of America and other countries of the world. The very first stock exchange was created in 1531 in Antwerp, Belgium. Okay, go ahead and get your notes, and in your notes, go ahead and put today's dates. Okay, 1531, the first stock exchange. And this was in Antwerp, Belgium. The very first stock exchange was created in 1531 in Antwerp, Belgium, and England's first stock exchange originated in 1777. So, 1773 is when Europe had its first stock exchange. America created its first stock exchange in New York, with New York Stock Exchange dominating the financial pages of the newspaper and causing waves in the financial world every week. It's almost humorous to hear of its humble beginnings. With billions of dollars moving about daily, you might find it hard to believe the NYSE's beginnings were with a handful of men standing in front of a buttonwood tree near the Trinity Church in East Manhattan shortly after the American Revolution. Silver was traded for paper documents, giving proof that the bearer now owned stock in the cargo that was moving into the harbor each day. The goods were available and the business was brisk. Trading in New York had begun. In the early days of our nation, the colonial government was looking for a way to finance its wartime operations, so it sold bonds. If a person bought a bond, they received a paper for a certain amount of money and period of time. After that time expired, the person turned in the bond and was given the cost of the bond plus profit. Okay, so in America, it doesn't really give a date. It just says America's Stock Exchange. Let's put America's Stock Exchange. Okay, and it said that it began in New York. Silver was traded for paper documents. So silver was traded for paper documents. And these paper documents were stock in the cargo that was moving in the harbor each day. The goods were available and the business was brisk. Trading in New York had begun. It says the colonial government was looking for a way to finance the war. So the colonial government needed to finance the war. So it started selling bonds. So it sold bonds. Okay. At the same time, the first banks in American history were being created, and once again, cash was needed to make the start successful. In addition to bonds, the banks sold little parts of their banks to whoever had the money and the desire to own a share in the business. Okay, so in 1531, the first stock exchange was in Antwerp, Belgium. In 1773, Europe Stock Exchange started. American Stock Exchange started in New York. Silver was traded, man, I can't spell today, for paper documents. The colonial government needed a way to finance the war, so they sold bonds. And it said at the same time, okay, the first banks in U.S. were being created, and they needed cash to get started. So they started selling parts of their bank, which were shares. So they started selling shares. Once again, the idea was good and the business grew. These transactions were the beginning of the stock market today. The men would meet on what was once a farmer's market area known as Wall Street in New York, desiring better organization. 24 men gathered and initiated the New York Stock Exchange, which is also known by its initials, NYSE. Okay. So the New York Stock Exchange began. I'm going to use the letters, NYSE. You just have to remember they stand for New York Stock Exchange. When the 1900s brought the Industrial Revolution, Wall Street peaked and the New York Stock Exchange was getting all the business it could use. Okay, I'm going to put Wall Street. Wall Street is a street in New York, and that's where the New York Stock Exchange began, was on Wall Street, and that's going to be important later. So in the 1900s, We had the Industrial Revolution. It's when all the industries started progressing. We started getting all the different kinds of technology. We had a sudden advance in industries and technology. Was getting all the business it could use. Some of the stocks that were offered for sale were not reliable enough to put in the New York Stock Exchange. So a brisk business was running outside on the curb of the street. This was called curb trading. Okay. Okay. Curb trading. It says I don't know if I want to call them unreliable stocks. We'll say stocks. We'll say less reliable. Were sold on the curb. Sold on the curb. That's why it's called curb trading. They were sold on the curb. So this was called the curb exchange. It later became known as American Stock Exchange. That's a C, by the way. So, the Curb Exchange and American Stock Exchange, and it's also known as Amex. American Stock Exchange. Okay. From its humble origins in the 1700s, the stock market in America has grown to be an important financial force in the world today. However, as important as the stock market seems, you may not be familiar with some of the terms surrounding it and its activity. Let's take a look at a few important terms. So the New York Stock Exchange began on Wall Street, and obviously that's New York. In 1900, the Industrial Revolution, okay, and they were getting all the business they needed. Some of the stocks weren't reliable enough to go to the New York Stock Exchange, so they were selling them on the curb. This was known as curb trading. It also became known as the Curb Exchange, and the American Stock Exchange, and Amex. Okay? So now we're going to talk about some terms associated with the stock market. And the first one we're going to talk about is an annual report. Let's talk about an annual report. This is a document that is issued each year to give details to investors about a company's financial performance. It is homework done so you may know if your money is being invested wisely. That is valuable information, as is the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is given every day on many financial networks. The Dow is a composite index of stocks prices represented 30 of the nation's biggest companies. Composite means that the Dow is a single index which represents the market performance of more than one company. In fact, 30 companies. Okay, so this is a document. Obviously, if it says annually, that means it's yearly. So this is a document issued yearly, and I probably don't even have to put that. You can tell by the title it is. Okay. There's the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Okay. This is also known as the Dow. It says the Dow is a composite index of stock prices representing 30 of the nation's biggest companies. So it's composite means that the Dow is a single index which represents the market performance of more than one company, in fact 30 companies. So it represents 30 companies it is almost as if the Dow did a days-long inspection of the top 30 and wants you to know how they performed. By looking at the chart, you can get an idea of the status or the health of the nation's top companies. Since these companies are essentially the backbone of the nation's economy, you can get an idea of the financial health of corporate America. Okay, so it shows you how they performed. Okay, these are the top 30 companies in America. When you hear the TV reports on the NASDAQ, you are hearing news about the National Association of Securities Dealers Automated Quotations, a computerized nationwide trading system for over 4,000 companies. Zoom, Microsoft, and other high-tech companies are listed here. On the NASDAQ Composite Index, you will get an idea of the strength of the high-tech industry. Okay, I want you to go through and study your notes, study this lesson, and go ahead and answer the questions.